The day I realized some people will look you dead in the eye and decide you're disposable, I was standing in my own yard with dirt under my fingernails and a hose still running. I'm Renee Walker, 67, retired middle school guidance counselor, and I've lived in my house in Brier Hollow, North Carolina for so long the creak on the third stair feels like part of my heartbeat. My late husband and I bought this place when we were young and stubborn, when a starter home meant 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a dream you couldn't afford to say out loud. We raised our kids here. We painted these walls ourselves. We paid the whole thing off years ago. After my husband passed, this house wasn't just shelter. It was the last place on earth where I could still hear him, if I listened hard enough. So when my grandson moved in, it wasn't some shady arrangement. It was family helping family. His name is Evan. He's 24, fresh out of college with a degree in environmental science, and the job market greeted him like a locked door with a smiley face sticker on it. He took part-time shifts at a local coffee place, the kind where they spell your name wrong, but somehow charge extra for oat milk. Evan helped with groceries, fixed my porch light without me asking, and called me ma'am, even when I told him not to. I liked having him here. I liked the sound of someone else living in the house instead of just me and the ticking kitchen clock. Brier Hollow used to be the kind of neighborhood where people waved even if they didn't know your name. Then, about a year ago, a couple bought the newer place across from me, the one with the perfect lawn and the driveway that always looked freshly washed. The husband, Todd, was quiet and polite. The wife, though, her name was Maris. She was early 40s, glossy hair, bright white teeth, and that particular kind of confidence that feels less like self-esteem and more like a threat. She talked like she was always giving feedback. And her favorite phrase, I learned fast, was, just so you know. Just so you know your hedges are too high. Just so you know your trash bin is visible from the street. Just so you know property values are everybody's business. At first I tried to be neighborly. I offered cookies. I made small talk. I asked about her kids. Maris smiled like she'd been trained for it. Then she started the little comments. This part of town is really changing, isn't it? I'm surprised the city allows older homes to stay like this. People don't realize how quickly a neighborhood can go downhill if no one enforces standards. She said standards the way some people say oxygen, like we'd all die without it. So I kept my distance. A nod, a wave, nothing more. That should have been enough. But people like Maris don't want peace. They want a stage. One Saturday in late June, I was out front watering my flowers. It was hot and bright, the air thick, the kind of morning where your hair sticks to your neck. I hear fast footsteps on pavement, sharp and decisive, and I look up. Maris is crossing the street straight toward me like she's late to a meeting she scheduled herself. Renee, she says, no hello, no good morning, just my name like it's a warning. We need to talk. I shut off the hose slowly. All right, I said, keeping my voice light. What's going on? She doesn't look at me at first. She looks at my house, then toward the side driveway, like she's already writing a report in her head. That young man staying here, she says. Your grandson? Yes, I answered. Evan. He moved in a few months ago. Maris presses her lips together. We've noticed he comes and goes at strange hours. Late nights, early mornings. It's raising concerns. I actually laughed once, because it sounded so ridiculous. He works shifts at a coffee shop, I said. Sometimes he opens. Sometimes he closes. She flicked her hand like my explanation was irrelevant. Regardless, this is a family neighborhood. People don't want a rotating cast of adults living with retirees. It changes the atmosphere. The way she said retirees made it sound like we were a category on a label. I felt my shoulders tighten. He's not a random adult, I said. He's my grandson. He's family. Maris finally looks directly at me, and her eyes are cool, practiced. I'm going to be direct, she said. I'm on the neighborhood council. We have community guidelines. Adult residents who are not homeowners need to be registered. If they're not financially independent, it becomes a problem. I blinked. Neighborhood council? She nodded like I'd missed a memo. We keep things consistent here. It's why people buy in. So I'm going to need you to have him moved out within 30 days. 30 days. She said it like she was telling me a coupon was expiring. Like my grandson was a broken appliance. I just stood there, holding the hose, water dripping onto my shoes, thinking, is this woman actually trying to evict my family from my own home on my own lawn? I could feel that hot, Familiar anger that comes when someone looks at you and decides you're weak because you're older, because you're quiet, because you're polite. Maris, I said, slow and steady. You don't get to tell me who lives in my house. She smiled. Not friendly. More like a customer service smile with teeth. I understand you believe that, she said, but all properties in Brier Hollow fall under the association covenants. It's in the deed. The council has authority. I took off one glove, because suddenly I wanted my hands free, like the truth needed skin contact. My house isn't part of your association, I said. Her smile faltered. That's not possible, she snapped. Everyone here is. I shook my head. The newer development is. The home's built after 2008. Mine was here decades before that. When they formed the association, several of us opted out. We were grandfathered out. I have paperwork. Maris's cheeks colored. You're mistaken. I'm not, I said. And then I added, because I could feel her trying to bully her way back into control. Also, you might want to double-check your council situation. I talked to Mr. Hensley last week. He's been the association president for years. Funny he didn't mention you running anything. Maris went still. Her eyes widened just a fraction, like a mask slipping. Then she spun around and walked back across the street without another word. When I turned to go inside, Evan was standing in the doorway. Grandma, he said, half amused, half concerned. Was that about me? I looked at him and felt that protective ache in my chest. It was, I said. But nobody's kicking you out of anywhere. He tried to smile. Do I need to start packing? I pointed at him. You pack one box, and I'll unpack it myself. He laughed, but I didn't miss the way his eyes dropped for a second. Because the truth is, even when you know you're right, being targeted still sticks to your skin. And I knew something else too. Maris wasn't the type to walk away embarrassed and learn humility. She was the type to walk away embarrassed and start planning revenge. Over the next 2 weeks, Maris turned her energy into a full-time hobby. I got anonymous complaints filed with the city about my grass being excessively long. Someone called about my porch violating visual standards, even though my porch has looked exactly the same for 15 years. Evan got a note on his windshield about street parking disrupting neighborhood flow, even though he was legally parked on a public street. Then the rumors started. A neighbor I've known since my kids were in diapers pulled me aside and said, Renee, I don't want to stir things up, but Maris has been asking if you're renting rooms out. She told someone she thinks you're running a boarding house. A boarding house? At 67. In my paid-off home. I wanted to laugh, but it didn't feel funny. Evan tried to pretend it didn't bother him, but one night he came into the kitchen while I was making tea and said quietly, maybe I should just find another place for now. I don't want you dealing with this because of me. I set the mug down, maybe a little too hard. Evan, I said, listen to me. People like her count on you shrinking. They count on you thinking you're the problem. He looked guilty, like he was carrying a weight that wasn't his. I just hate that you're getting pulled into drama. I walked over, put my hand on his shoulder. I've spent my whole career teaching kids how to stand up to intimidation, I said. I'm not about to let a grown woman with a clipboard personality teach my grandson that bullies win. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started moving. First call I made was to Mr. Hensley, the actual association president for the newer part of Brier Hollow. The second I mentioned Maris, he let out this long sigh like he'd been holding it for months. She's not on the board, he told me. She volunteers sometimes, but she has no authority. She's been telling people she does. I said, she tried to give me a 30-day notice to remove my grandson. There was a pause, then he said, absolutely not. That's outrageous. Second call was to my friend Claudia, retired attorney, property law, the kind of woman whose voice makes you sit up straight even when she's being kind. I told her everything, and she said, Renee, stop dealing with her verbally. You need a paper trail. Put it in writing. People like that hate documentation. Third, I talked to 2 neighbors who'd also been bothered by Maris. One had gotten guideline reminders taped to their door. Another had been reported for unauthorized yard decor. They were tired, but once they heard Maris was trying to force family out of a home, they were done being quiet. Claudia drafted a cease and desist letter, clean, legal, calm, and absolutely terrifying if you understand consequences. It outlined the harassment, the false claims of authority, the interference with lawful residents, and it demanded she stop immediately. It also explained what could happen next if she didn't: formal complaints, civil action, the whole deal. I printed it. I gathered copies of the bogus notices and photos of the notes. I put everything in a folder, the same way I used to prepare for tough parent conferences back when I was working. Then, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, I walked across the street and rang Maris's doorbell. She opened the door like she was expecting someone she could dismiss. When she saw me, her expression froze. "Renee," she said slowly. "What is this?" I smiled, polite enough to be unsettling. "Hi, Maris. We need to talk. May I come in?" She hesitated, and that hesitation was the first sign she finally understood she wasn't the only one who could make someone uncomfortable. She let me in. Her living room looked like a catalog. White furniture, spotless surfaces, not a single thing out of place. It felt less like a home and more like a showroom where nobody was allowed to relax. Maris sat in an armchair across from me, posture tight, chin lifted. "So," she said, "what are you doing here?" I set the folder on my lap. "I'm here because your behavior has crossed the line," I said. She scoffed. "I don't know what you mean." I opened the folder. "You claimed authority you don't have. You tried to force my grandson out of my home. You've filed nuisance complaints. You've spread rumors." Her face flushed. "I'm protecting the neighborhood." "No," I said, calm. "You're controlling it." Then I slid the letter across the coffee table. "This is a cease and desist," I said. "Written by an attorney. It requests you stop harassing me and my family immediately." Her eyes dropped to the page. Her fingers tightened around the paper like it was hot. "An attorney?" she whispered. "Yes," I said, "because I'm done playing your little power games." She looked up, trying to regain that front-lawn confidence. "You can't threaten me." I leaned in slightly, not loud, just firm. "I'm not threatening you. I'm informing you. If you continue, there will be consequences, and you won't be able to talk your way out of them." Silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, she said, quieter, "What do you want?" I exhaled. "I want you to stop. No more complaints. No more notes. No more gossip. And I want you to apologize, to me and to Evan." Her jaw tightened. "Apologize?" "Yes," I said, "because you didn't just enforce standards. You tried to humiliate an older woman on her own property and push out a young man who did nothing wrong." For a second, I thought she might explode. Instead, something in her posture shifted. Her shoulders dropped, and her voice cracked just a little when she said, "I didn't think you'd fight back." That sentence hit me harder than the threats, because it told me everything. She'd expected me to fold. She'd expected me to be grateful for her guidance. She'd expected me to shrink. "That's your mistake," I said quietly. "You assumed my age meant I was easy." Maris stared at the letter again, eyes glossy, angry and embarrassed at the same time. Then she nodded once. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll stop." I stood up. "Good," I said, "because the next step isn't a letter. It's a record." For a few weeks after that, the street felt calmer. No notes. No city complaints. No dramatic walks where Maris looked like she was inspecting for violations. Evan relaxed. I relaxed. The neighborhood felt like it remembered how to breathe. Then one morning there was a knock on my door. Evan opened it and went quiet. I walked over, and there was Maris, holding a bakery box like it was a peace offering. She looked different, still polished, but less sharp around the edges. "Hi," she said awkwardly. "I baked these." As an apology. Evan looked at me like, "Is this real?" I didn't trust it either, but I also believe people deserve a chance to prove who they want to be. "Come in," I said. "Coffee's already on." We sat at my kitchen table, the real kind of table, chipped corner, mismatched chairs, sunlight across the floor. Maris apologized. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but clearly. She told Evan she shouldn't have judged him. She told me she shouldn't have spoken to me like I was incapable. Then she admitted something I didn't expect. "I started seeing a therapist," she said, eyes fixed on her hands. "I think I use control when I feel anxious." I didn't realize how far I'd gone. Evan didn't say much, but his shoulders eased. Maris even offered to pass his resume to a friend of Todd's who worked with environmental compliance. No promises, just a connection. When she left, Evan exhaled and said, "That was not on my bingo card." I laughed, but later, when the house got quiet again, a different thought settled in. Because yes, she backed off. Yes, she apologized. But I can't stop wondering. Did Maris change because she understood the harm she caused, or because she finally met someone who wouldn't flinch? How many people did she push around before me? How many younger families, renters, single moms, older neighbors did she intimidate into silence because nobody wanted the hassle? That's what still bothers me. Not just what she did to us, but what she probably got away with before she picked the wrong porch. So I want to know what you think. If you were in my shoes, would you have accepted the apology and moved on? Or would you have filed an official complaint anyway, just to make sure there's a record, to make sure she can't do this to the next person? And if you've ever dealt with someone like Maris, an HOA bully, a self-appointed neighborhood enforcer, someone who hides cruelty behind standards and property values, tell me your story in the comments. Where's the line between giving someone a second chance and letting them off too easy? If you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's ever been underestimated. Because sometimes the sweetest justice isn't yelling, it's watching a bully realize they picked the wrong person to push. Now tell me, was I right to let her start over, or should I have made sure she never got the chance to do it again?